And I've told you guys before what I think about the horror genre, that when it's done well, it can be amazing. But it's often a genre that I have a lot of issues with. But what I appreciate about Scream is that it doesn't really take itself too seriously. And it just goes so over the top meta that I absolutely love it. But when Scream came along and just made fun of it, I appreciated that. It just adds to the fun, and it adds kind of like a slapstick vibe to the film. This franchise is actually deeper than you would think. You would just look at the posters and it's like, okay, it's just typical slasher movies. But no, they actually touch on some important stuff about humanity. Well, it's finally here. I'm finally giving my thoughts on the Scream 6 spoilers. And again, this review is way late. This movie's been out for 2 months already, but I just wanted to finish off that review series cleanly and not leave things hanging. There's just so much good stuff in this movie that it's too good not to mention. And if you've seen my other review, you guys know I thought Scream 6 was great. It lived up to my expectations I had for it at the beginning of the year. While there were still some things that I had issues with, small issues, albeit. I thought that film was great. If you want to see that movie review, I'll put a tag right here for it. First, I'm going to be touching on the thing I was so excited about going into this review, and that is the opening scene. Like the other Scream films, it starts with someone getting a phone call, and in this film, it's Samara Weaving. Which, having her in this film was an interesting choice because these same directors made the film Ready or Not, which she was the main character in. And it was just a good reminder for me to eventually watch that film. And now that I've seen both of these films and I really love them, I'm excited to see what they did before this. But putting that aside, which was just my own nerdism thrown at you just there, the scene is Samara Weaving getting a phone call from a person that she's supposed to meet. And it just builds and builds and builds. And the whole time you know that something's up. You know that this guy that she's talking to is probably Ghostface. And it does some weird things here and there. It tries to make you think at a certain point that he's not Ghostface and he's being attacked. But then it's revealed that he is Ghostface. That voice changer comes on and you're like, oh my gosh, oh crap, this is not going to go well. So she gets stabbed to death in an alley. And just everything up to this point, it just seems like a regular Scream opening. It's very well shot. You know, Samara Weaving is a really good actress. But there's really nothing here that separates it from the other Scream films just yet. Until Ghostface does that iconic swipe that I like to call it, that's killing slash that he does before the title screen comes up. But the film doesn't cut to a title screen. It just stays on Ghostface, just watching Samara Weaving's corpse. And after a few seconds of this, I pretty much figured out they're going to show this guy's face. They're going to show whoever this person is. Yep, sure enough, it's the guy who played Flash in the MCU Spider-Man films. And at that moment, I'm like, wow, that is such a bold choice. That's crazy. I kept thinking, is this like a Scream 4 opening where it's going to turn out that Sam and Tara are sitting down on a couch somewhere and they're watching the newest Stab film? Like, it was just that crazy. But no, later in the scene, you see Tara walking down the street and okay, what the hell is going on here? I had no idea what the film was going to do at that point. I was thinking, okay, maybe it's this weird thing where the whole movie, it's just building up to him revealing himself to the other characters, and we just know it the whole time, and it's this form of dramatic irony that was similar to how I felt about Knives Out, where in that film you have the character of Ana de Armas, and it's just the whole time wondering, Are we just sitting here waiting for the reveal that she might have killed this person that we're investigating the murder of? Or is there something else? And it turns out that in Scream 6 there actually is something else, and I'll get to that in a second. But what really added to this scene, besides just the shock value of showing who Ghostface was within the opening few minutes, was just this exploration of what it is to be Ghostface. And for one thing, I like the element that as soon as this kill happens, this guy is just, you can just hear heavy breathing, just the reaction that any regular person would have at killing someone. And this was probably this guy's first kill, so it really fits. But what I liked even more about what they followed up with this character is that it really shows the darker side of this iconic slasher villain. Because we've seen a lot of killers at this point, and sure, some of them are sympathetic. Billy, you can understand who he is. You can understand Jill's plight in wanting as much recognition as Sidney. But then there are these other characters in this franchise that are just psychos, that are just weird psychos with these ideas that they're doing something meta with film, and oh, we're gonna do something so crazy, and and the whole Richie and Amber thing remaking Stab 8, which is the last Jedi of the series, which that was actually brilliant writing, that the experience of watching a movie like The Last Jedi would create a ghost face. I just thought that was so freaking smart. And then, of course, you get to Matthew Lillard in the first film, and that's just such an over-the-top performance that it's really fun, even though he's just off the rails insane. But when you really sit down to think about who these people really are, who are these people, if you take away the ridiculous schemes, the crazy performances, these people are actually scary. And this film really puts a human skin on top of that. And it gets to a part where this guy himself gets a call from Ghostface, and thinking that it's just the guy that he's working with on setting up the kills that would have been. He's telling him, oh man, it felt so weird at first, but then the more I kept stabbing her, the more it just felt like killing an animal, and it just felt fine after a while, or however he said it. One of the things that I like in horror movies, and I feel like it isn't done enough, because so many filmmakers focus on jump scares, on just pure shock value, and just all these tropes that we keep seeing in these movies. But one thing that filmmakers keep forgetting is just, you can have a scary scene that's just someone talking. It was just a tense scene. It really took away the meta facade of Ghostface. It took away whatever was there, and it just said, here's just plain and simple one of these psychos. It was much darker than I expected. It was wow. That was an opening to a Scream film. Which, speaking of that darker edge of the film, it carries over to our main protagonist, Sam. Especially when you get the scene where she's having a session with her psychiatrist. And the whole time it's giving a recap of Scream 2022, and it's just building to this moment where she mentions that she took care of Richie by stabbing him 20 or so times. And you just see the psychiatrist's reaction, and it's our reaction that we're thinking, yeah, you did what you had to do, but you sure you're not going to become like Daddy? That's just saying that out loud. Yeah, it makes you feel a bit uneasy about this character. The film in general is just an extension of her arc from the first film of like, is she going to be like Billy Loomis? And I'll get more into that later in the review. But as far as Sam's relationship with Tara, where I talked about in the spoiler-free review that it was an expansion of the journey of their characters. And yeah, there's some powerful stuff about just sibling relations. It was something that I resonated a bit with because of my relationship with my older brother. And it's a film I appreciated seeing now that I'm older and I can interpret both sides of this. I can understand Tara's angle, where she wants to live her own life. She doesn't want this event in 2022 to affect her for the rest of her life. But then I can also see Sam, where everything that's happened, it just shows that she needs to protect Tara. And like I mentioned before, the film has that conflict between these characters that just builds to this arc for Sam where she eventually has to let go, which is a literal line of dialogue in this movie where they're being attacked by the ghost faces at the end, and she has to let go of Tara so that they can both face off the threats. I was just shocked how much that moment actually was emotionally resonant, because the whole time we're actually siding with Sam and we actually kind of feel protective of Tara. And what added to this was just the whole fact that throughout the film, you kind of imagined that one of these characters would die. It just felt like that. Again, this film was dark, and it proved itself early to just take risks and just say, okay, these characters that we know, they're not as safe as you think they are. And it was probably the moment in the movie where the stakes were at their highest. Again, Wes Craven's writing and directing of those original 4 films was so great, and the characters were really compelling then as well. But I just feel like this is a series that's actually kind of matured as it's gone along, and now we're getting all this compelling stuff about siblings and just relationships between family and the struggles of letting go and letting people live their own lives. But just in general, I really enjoyed that ending where they actually do team up at the end and they're working together to stop the different ghost faces. And there was just something oddly wholesome about it. They're killing people, but it's what's bringing them together in the end. But now I am going to talk about one of the issues that I mentioned in the spoiler-free review. And in that review, I mentioned that there was a character with some pointless writing and that ended up in a place that I just thought the writing made it weird. The writing made it awkward, that they didn't really expand on what this character was doing in the movie. And unfortunately, that character that I have the issue with is Gale. For one thing, and there's actually 3 kind of issues with this character. The first one being that it's actually a repeat of her arc from Screams 2 and 3. The arc of her where she's just self-centered and she's just trying to get ahead, not caring who she hurts. And there's a whole scene between her and Sam where Sam's pissed off that she wrote something about their experience in 2022. And I was just looking at that and and I was thinking, this was something that I called out Scream 3 for being derivative. In Scream 3, this arc of Gale that these writers seem to keep pushing on us, it was already old by that point. Again, another character that's pissed off at Gale. Gale seems to be selfish and not caring, and it's like, how many times are we going to do this? How many times? It's old. It's done. Has this character not evolved? But it did lead to a fun scene where she almost gets decked by Sam, just like Sidney decked her in the first film and Scream 2. But Sam misses, and then Tara gets a good swing at her, which that scene was funny. For another thing, we get introduced to this new dude that she's going out with now that Dewey is, of course, died, which I guess makes sense that she could have met someone in that time period. And it's just this kind of weird thing where apparently she's trying to move on, but we as the audience haven't really moved on. But I guess the writers knew that because it really doesn't matter. And as soon as Ghostface shows up in her apartment, he gets killed off. I was just thinking, well, okay, what was the point of introducing her new lover, I guess, that we know absolutely nothing about? Honestly, like, Gale's not used as much in this film as other films. Her screen time in this one might even be less than Scream 5. But unfortunately, it might be my least favorite appearance of this character because not something I had huge issues with, but it just stuff that baffled me that I in a few minutes could have written something better for her to do in this movie. Well, putting that aside, the scene with Ghostface I did think was very well made. I like the whole aspect where she gets that call from Ghostface, and it's this whole thing is like, hey, you never got a call from me, and it's right. Gale was never called by Ghostface. She had what seemed to be a better kill than Dewey. Dewey, I thought, was kind of stupid, where he had the gun pointed at the head and he got distracted by a phone call. Here, she's going for that kill move, and then Ghostface just gets the jump on her with a shard of glass. But she was at least trying. Where my real problem with this scene occurs is that it seems like she is dying in this scene. And everyone else is calling the ambulance, calling 911, getting her to a hospital for help. But it just seems like after this scene, the film just drops her. It drops her. And I was just wondering, uh, did she die? Did she live? Why are we not seeing her at this point? What's happening? Leaving the theater, I was 50-50 as to whether one of the legacy characters of this franchise was dead or alive. And of course, this other person is a smaller character, but the same thing happens to Mindy in this movie, where she goes on the subway and then she gets attacked by Ghostface, and she just gets left there. I guess she's getting help from people, but then the film never mentions her again. At least when Dewey was stabbed in Scream 2, it showed him being carried off in the stretcher, and it was implied that he was okay. It was implied that everything there was going to be fine. Here, it was just like, okay, let's have these things happen to these characters, but no, let's move on. We're more interested in the end reveals of this movie. Again, I mentioned this in the review, and I'll mention it again here. It was awkward. Watching that was awkward and almost like a plot hole, I would say. And granted, all the stuff I did mention, it's stuff that when I think about it, I am annoyed with it, but it's not huge stuff. It's stuff I can easily get over. But going back to the things that I did really enjoy is that we actually get the appearance of a different legacy character, one from Scream 4, and that is Kirby Reed, played by Hayden Panettiere. She was one of Jill's friends, and she was almost like a third main character outside of Sidney and Jill. And I liked seeing her in that movie, but there wasn't enough with her character that I felt like I needed to mention her in that review. It was after I had already filmed and started editing that review that I got a notification on my phone of a news article talking about how she recently lost her younger brother. And just to give a point of perspective, I'm not the type of guy that is so into reading about celebrities, knowing more about their personal lives. In my opinion, I don't read that stuff because I don't want to read something that I won't like, and then that's going to change how I view them in the movie, and then my analysis of the film is not as objective as I want it to be. But I was reading the story, and it was sad. It was I didn't know these people at all, but it was just sad reading this that they were very close. They worked on a lot of films together, and now it's just over. And actually reading this article was the first time that I knew that she was going to be in Scream 6. I actually didn't know she was going to be in this film before then. I thought she actually died in Scream 4 when that guy stabbed her. Reading that article, it actually made me pay more attention to her afterwards. And just everything that I've heard regarding her, and she's been having other issues outside of this trauma, and like with alcoholism, and trying to get her career started over all these problems that she's been having. And she was hoping that her being in this new movie was going to be her comeback. And just hearing all this, it was honestly rough. It was very rough. And I think that I have my own problems. I think that I have my own personal struggles that I have to get through on a daily basis. But just listening to some of this stuff, I honestly can't imagine what she's going through right now. and I really hope that she gets better. I really do. She seems like a really nice person, and it's almost heartbreaking to read certain things that are happening to her. But as far as her character in this film, again, I really liked her in this movie. I like the whole scene where it's like a geek face off with Mindy, and they're talking about different horror films, giving their opinions. I like the whole moment where Gale's talking, and she says something like, "I didn't know the FBI gave badges to children," because she was a teen in Scream 4. Besides that, there was actually a layer of depth with this character that I didn't see coming. She actually became an FBI agent because, similar to Sidney, she doesn't want this experience that happened to her, everything going on with Jill, to make her a victim for life. She actually, at this point, wants to catch people doing bad things. I just thought it was an interesting direction to take her character. I would have never imagined that they could have taken such a small character out of Scream 4 and made it into an actually compelling storyline, an actually compelling scene in another movie. And in the end, it was just fan service that had meaning to it. There are people that really need comebacks, and she needs one. And I would love to not just see her in another Scream film, maybe Scream 7, but just see her in another movie. I just hope that she can get through whatever she can get through and find a sense of peace after all this turmoil. But just putting all that aside with that character, the thing that I appreciated out of seeing her again, and even the plot line where it's talking about the different masks that are left at these kill sites, that this new Ghostface is leaving the masks of the other ghost faces from the other films, among which you get to see Billy Loomis's costume and mask that he used in that film, which I'll get into in a scene later. But what I liked about this is that a couple of points in Scream 5, there were moments where these directors were clearly making fun of Wes Craven's other films with lines like, "Oh, there hasn't been a great stab movie since the first one." I think it was Mindy that said something like, "Oh yeah, no one talks about the inferior sequels," and but it was just satisfying to see in this movie that they're actually having to involve these other movies that they deem inferior. And I was just thinking, see, you guys, see, you want those connections to those other films. Don't deny it. Don't you deny it. You like it. You like it. Thinking about that, I'll probably insert that one clip from The Lighthouse.
You'll do it! And by God and by golly, you'll do it, smiling lad, because you like it. You like it because I says you will. Contradict me again, and I'll dock your wages.
But now I'm going to talk about another thing that I loved out of this movie, and that is the reveal of Ghostface. Which, for one thing, there's a moment where you already know that there are two ghost faces, which of course, it's nothing new for this franchise. There's been two before, and when we get to see that again. But what I really liked was this moment where they do the iconic cleaning where they just grab the knife and they clean it. There's a moment where two of them do it in sync. I thought that was awesome. But then, yeah, what surprised me, and I was sitting in the theater and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Was we the first film that there's more than two killers, and it's probably gonna get overblown in 7. We're probably gonna get 7 killers in that movie, probably. This film needs to keep surprising us. But this film, even though you see that there's 3 of them and 2 of them are already revealed, before the third person pulls off their mask, and again going back to the filmmakers messing with us, before this movie came out, there was, I guess, a debate online that because this is the first film that Sidney isn't in, is she Ghostface? Of course, any of us Scream fans would be like, that's stupid, they shouldn't do that, and I'll get more into that in a moment. But it seems like for a few seconds, while we're waiting for this person to reveal themselves, I was thinking, nah, bro, these directors wouldn't have the guts, the gumption, the balls to pull off a Ghostface Sidney. They wouldn't do that. Or would they? And I just kept watching, and the mask comes off, and it's some other character from this movie, which I was like, okay, they don't have the balls to do that. But I'm at least glad that that's not one of the risks that they chose. Because honestly, I think that any of us fans at this point, we just kind of want Sydney to just have her own life. At least I do. Just have her own life. Just leave her alone. She's been through enough. But again, what I mentioned in that spoiler-free review is that this film, that reveal, it really says something about human connection. And I was very vague when I said that in that review, but now I get to explain what I meant. And one of the killers is this detective, or just I forget, someone working at the police department, one of the important people down there. And the reveal is that him and his kids are after Sam and Tara because Sam killed Richie, his son, his other son. There's this moment where they're in this room that's showing one of Richie's movies that he made as a teen, probably. And it's this detective character looking at this. There's a moment of sympathy with this character. He's internally, emotionally distraught about the loss of his son. But what this moment really speaks to is just how we see things that we don't understand based on the people that we love. This guy mentions as he's during this scene that he never understood his son's fascination with horror films, or violent horror films for that matter, but that he respects it. Or at least that's what the scene is going for. This does resonate with me. For example, there are moments where my mom and I, we have different tastes when we watch movies. And there's been a few times where she's been like, why do you want to watch that movie? And it's probably some horror movie. And again, not big on horror movies, but I've seen a few good ones here and there, and that's why I keep watching them still. But there's been moments where she's like, why do you watch that? And she clearly doesn't get it. But then again, the more I've watched horror films and I've been able to, at times, mention certain things about them to her, I feel like she's gotten an appreciation of at least the craft, that she at least understands why these films are important. And it's kind of the same thing with comic book movies, where she really didn't get the Marvel comics until I became a huge fan of them, and then I got her into watching a lot of the movies, and at this point I've shown her the vast majority of the MCU, and it took her from being this something with her that she didn't get, she didn't understand, and because of that she thought she didn't like, to now something that she can enjoy with me. Again, touching on things that we don't understand, but we grow to understand, we grow to appreciate, we grow to respect, because those that we love consider it part of their lives. And as a result, if we try to understand these things, it might change our lives for the better. Or in this case, with this cop character, it changes his life for the worst and he becomes Ghostface. The opening scene, a thing that this franchise does is that sometimes, even when you go back and look at certain Ghostface kills in the movie, it's not obvious who's under the mask, because at times it's several people that could be under that mask. I could see, like, watching this scene, it makes more sense that it's one of his kids, just probably because of the physicality and probably just more easier access than him leaving the station to go do this. But with that opening scene, I like thinking that it was him killing that person. Not just because of the violence, where clearly this ghost face is pissed off at this guy for making such a spectacle out of murdering people for really no reason. But I like to think it's him because it's almost like this arc of him not getting horror films. But because his son was so interested in them, because he loved his son so much, he grew a certain respect for what he didn't understand. And now that his son is gone, he just saw that as the best form of avenging the death of someone he loved. And seriously, that was just 5-10 seconds of this movie But just that whole wait of these months, it gave me all that time to have that deeper analysis of what was going on under the surface, which just makes me reiterate that this franchise is actually deeper than you would think. You would just look at the posters and it's like, okay, it's just typical slasher movies. But no, they actually touch on some important stuff about humanity. And I just hope that these directors understand that they really succeeded with that and they just keep doing it. Because it's what's always going to, in my mind, it's what's always going to separate Scream from the vast majority of these dime a dozen dollar store slasher films that we always get, that Hollywood thinks that we need, but we don't. We need more of this stuff. But with all that being said, with all that stuff lingering with this character, you still want to see him taken down. And it's such a cool scene where he apparently gets knocked out by Sam and he's left lying there. He wakes up and he gets this call, similar to how Billy Loomis, once that reveal happened, he gets a call from Sidney before being attacked. He gets a call from Sam and they're talking for a bit. And then suddenly Sam comes out of the shadows wearing her dad's costume and just stabs the hell out of him. It's a scene that's satisfying, but at the same time kind of uneasy to watch, because it's you're seeing Sam, her wearing that costume while she did this. It was just a clearer indication that she could actually become more like her father than she wants to. But I will admit that this ending in general, it left me with less interest in Scream 7 than I had leaving the ending of Scream 5 and having the interest of Scream 6. And it's not because Scream 6 disappointed me, because it didn't do that whatsoever. Is this the ending that I would want for these characters? Is this how I would want the last appearance of these characters to go down? No, there's still more you can do with these characters. There's still a better crescendo for them. But this film paid off 5 so well, and it just gave me enough of what I wanted. It gave me this powerful arc with Sam. It just left me satisfied. Which, leaving the theater, I was just thinking to myself, is that such a radical concept these days? That now we're getting so many sequels and so many follow-ups to movies that we love. Is it such a crazy idea that a film just leaves you satisfied? I really want to see Scream 7, but I'm less excited for it because now I'm wondering, okay, are they actually going to be able to satisfy me again, like they did with this film? Just stuff to think about. And yeah, that's the end of this video. All that I just wanted to get off my chest, complete that set of reviews that I set out to make. It was just stuff I was thinking about for such a long time, and I just thought it was a waste of a really good video if I didn't. So, looking forward into the future, I already shot my Guardians of the Galaxy reviews with someone else that has appeared before on this channel. You might remember him, but you'll see him again. And I really enjoyed making those, and I'm excited to get those to you guys, as well as I'm going to be doing content on Spider-Man, the Spider-Verse animated films, with the recent release of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And if you're interested in any of those reviews, remember, hit the subscribe button, bell for notifications, hit a like. Guys, I can't do this alone. Make sure to give me some support if you're enjoying what I'm doing here. And I'll see you guys next time.